This is one of the Russia's most valued pieces of cultural heritage, the State Historical Museum, founded in 1872 on the order of the Russian Emperor Alexander II. However, it opened to the public only 11 years later in 1883, when the construction of this building was finally completed. The venue for the museum was officially selected and a competition for the building's construction was announced. The winner of the competition was Vladimir Osipovich Sherwood, a fairly well-known artist, best known as a professor of painting, but also renowned as an architect as well. Engineer Anatoly Alexandrovich Semenov, one of the most outstanding theoretical engineers of the time, was also involved and worked on the project together with Sherwood. Today there are around 5 million historical documents and exhibits stored here. Among them are also several connected to our home country, the ancient land of Uzbekistan. Interest here in Middle Asia came about as early as in the 20th century. Part of the collection also found its way to the collections of some of the world's largest museums, including the Metropolitan, the Louvre and the British Museum. But such vast collections, capable of showing us the historical context of over a century and a half, are of course stored in large museums, like the Historical Museum. The collection of Uzbek art in the State Historical Museum began almost from the first days of its foundation. Historians claim this is connected to the processes taking place in Russia in the second half of the 19th century. It is no secret that Russia was involved in several wars from the middle 60s almost till the late 80s. Some territories in Middle Asia became a part of the empire voluntarily, while others had to be conquered. We are aware of this and not trying to conceal this fact. Places like Khwarezmian, Bukhara and Khiva Khanates were especially active in this resistance. When the unification of the Russian Empire and joining of Middle Asian territories started to wind down, items and rarities of various kinds began to get sent here from Middle Asia. As early as in 1891, the museum opened its huge Central Asian exhibition, which became a sensation overnight. This old photograph gives us some insight into the exhibition of those times. The museum opened in 1883 and notice that 8 years pass, only 8 years from the time when the museum opened, when 20 rooms of the museum were already filled with the Central Asian exhibition. It was a truly incredible event. The general public got to learn about the territories that so recently had become a part of the Russian Empire, what kinds of people lived there, what culture and tradition they had, what their tastes were like, and more. And of course, this was extremely interesting for the public. The exhibition generated significant public interest. This can be clearly seen from the fact that it was visited personally by the Emperor of the Russian Empire, Alexander III. Unfortunately, the exhibits from that exposition haven't been preserved in the funds of the museum. However, since that time, the Historical Museum has already established a tradition of purchasing Eastern works from Moscow antique collectors. A huge role in building up the collection was taken by famous collectors and later by the museum's own research expeditions to Middle Asia. Our museum is over 130 years old, and since the very beginning, the aim of the museum and objective of the collection has been to reflect in a complete way the historical process undergone by those nations and cultures that used to inhabit the vast Russian Empire. Head of the Department of Archaeological Monuments and Doctor of Historical Sciences Natalia Shishlina spoke with us about how in the 1970s the Historical Museum received the findings of the Khwarezmian Archaeological Ethnographic Expedition of the Academy of Sciences. The expedition was headed over many years by the outstanding scientist and academician Sergei Tolstoy. Work in the lower reaches of the Amur area made it possible to study numerous archaeological monuments of pre-medieval times, such as encampments from the Stone Age and settlements of the Bronze and early Iron Ages. All these artifacts form their own kind of memory of the old years. The Bronze Age. How can we imagine that time? How did the people live in the southern Aral Sea region and in the estuaries of the largest Middle Asian rivers of the Amur Darya and Zarafshan? Here you can see a unique collection that originates from the ancient lands of Khwarezmian. These places were humming with life starting from the 4th century BC, when the boundless deserts and steppes were being explored by hunters and fishermen. They hunted the animals native to the area, including deer, Persian gazelles and wild boars. Now right here you can see a unique collection of arrowheads made of bone. The main materials used at those times for producing trade tools and weapons were bones and stones. These arrowheads are sharpened and highly polished animal bones. Among the findings from long-forgotten historical times are also some highly unique artifacts, like the stylized figure of a horse from the Yakyaparsan settlement dated the 8th-7th century BC. We link the golden age of the estuary with the beginning of a new historical path in the appearance here of farmers. This new era began from the 2nd century BC. Starting from the Bronze Age, a cultural dialogue had begun between the nomads living in the north part of the Eurasian steppe, which came into history under the name of the Ox civilization. The funds of the museum also hold a collection from the Bronze Age, including jewelry found in the Kokcha burial ground. Jewelry, always into pre-medieval cultures in particular, have been their own sort of ethnic passport. The woman whose frontlet was adorned with such rings claimed the following about herself: "I am a native here, I come from the world of steppes. The bracelet is made of bronze. This means that the artisans who made it knew all the details of jewelry production. They knew that the color of bronze, whether it be yellow or silver or more dark brown color, or as yellow as gold, depended on how much tin you add." In one of the areas of the Kokcha burial ground, a woman was wearing 15 bracelets. These rare shots show us the exciting minutes when the golden artifacts were first being taken out of the ground. These are a golden ornament in the shape of a rosaine, perhaps a piece of a holiday garment or an unfinished button, and a miniature pendant. They date back to the 4th century BC. Ancient unknown artisans were also good at pottery. During the excavation works of the old Khwarezmian settlement, archaeologists found several workshops where polished ceramics were produced, including with red engobes and simple clean patterns. The vessels found in the Koyakrilgan Kala settlement and the Kokcha burial ground were almost identical. Certainly, ancient civilization used pottery wheels. Steppe inhabitants made everything with their hands, while farmers were already using pottery wheels. Nowadays, there is a technique we can use to scrape the vessels inside and analyze what was kept in them and why they were sealed with tamga. This was a sign of ownership, but this was already in the 1st century BC. Scientists claim that the discovery of the ancient Khwarezmian civilization is one of the most outstanding events in archaeology and history, serving as evidence of the oldest culture of Central Asia and providing inexhaustible material for study. Ancient Khwarezmia was a sort of corridor where farmers and cattle breeders arrived, left and mixed together. The Great Silk Route was the successor of the other routes. It followed a route that could have been called, for instance, the Lead Route or the Tin Bronze Route. The State Historical Museum also displays the artifacts from Afrasiab settlement, including pieces of clay ossuaries and a small statuary. These are images of goddesses with a headcloth and a tall, complicated hairdo, as well as pieces of sculptures of young male musicians and men with vivid ethnic face types. It is curious that notwithstanding the stylization, that the faces of the characters are elaborately sculpted. Perhaps this is due to the fact that in ancient times, sculptors and potters treated clay as a special substance close to a human's essence, because the first man, Adam, was created from clay. In the pre-Muslim era, there was a range of rites associated with clay dishes. At those times, people believed that you could pass the diseases of a person to a clay dish. Later, within the period of Islamification, clay dishes were used in particular during fasting days. Because of their sacred meaning, ceramic dishes and cups were brought to mosques as offerings. The ceramics of Uzbekistan, rich in symbols, captivated travelers and collectors with their exotic appearance. This collection in the State Historical Museum was started in 1905, when famous collector and connoisseur of ancient art Peter Shukin presented the museum with around 300,000 antique items. His enormously rich collection included Uzbek work of arts, among others. Among those were ceramic dishes created in the ancient pottery center in the Fergana Valley and the settlement of Rishtan. One of them bears the Arabic numbers 1285. This is a date from the Hijri calendar. This corresponds to 1868. A rare specimen. Nowadays, the museum's funds hold around 200 works of ceramics produced in Uzbekistan. The biggest part of this collection was obtained during the Central Asian historical expeditions of the 50s, 70s of the previous century. Apart from purchasing items, the employees of the museum carefully studied various arts and crafts and technologies for creating ceramics, the secrets of which were passed down to them by the descendants of old artisans. The archive of the State Historical Museum holds collections from various pottery centers of Uzbekistan, Khwarezmia, Bukhara and Samarkand. These are dishes from a geometric ornamentation and stylized images of flowers and pomegranates. Dishes from Gijduan, Shahrisabz and Kitab were decorated in a free, picturesque manner. Those from Urgut and Jizak are covered with green-brown engobe and bear clean, engraved ornamentation. But the biggest part of this collection is made up of famous blue ceramics works from the Fergana Valley. Each of these dishes and cups seems to have preserved the touch of hands of its creator. From generation to generation, artisans have carefully passed down the traditions of Rishtan pottery, with its vivid turquoise painting and rich, exquisite decoration. A special group of Rishtan ceramics consists of the Chinne works, which imitate Chinese porcelain. They were made with white fire-resistant clay and covered with white enamel. As a rule, the stamps were placed on the back in the shape of Chinese hieroglyphs. The museum collection also has unique clay whistles made by famous hereditary artisan Hamro Rahimova from the Uba settlement near Bukhara. The fantastic animals here are products of the imagination of a woman who essentially founded a whole school of artisans in her village who work with clay plastic art. They made their whistles as if by intuition, like they were playing a game. And in the second half of the 20th century, these funny kind clay toys made the village famous far beyond the country's borders. The decorative embroidery of Uzbekistan also has some unique features. This Shahrisabz suzanne dates back to the middle of the 19th century. It was received by the museum in 1914 and, according to the museum's documents, was purchased from antique dealers. In the embroidery collection of the museum, there are suzannes from both Samarkand and Bukhara. These are true masterpieces of the 19th and early 20th century. They used to decorate the houses of city and village dwellers, making their home interiors look both warm and colorful. To create large suzannes, the skills of specially trained pattern painters, chismekash, and embroiderers, chokche, were required. White cotton textile was embroidered with silk thread. This suzanne composition, embroidered in Urgut, Samarkand Oblast, has no traditional Samarkand motif of chorchirop or four lamps. It was crafted more than a century ago. This is a suzanne from the 19th century, embroidered in Bukhara Oblast. Its pattern symbolizes a garden in bloom. This exquisite floral ornament is known as Garati chain. It has a long history and originates from the Herat embroidery tradition in the Oriental Renaissance era. All these treasures of national art were brought to the museum as a result of expeditions in 1951-1953. Museum traveled all around the main centers of crafts of Uzbekistan at those times: Kokand, Margilan, Samarkand, Bukhara and Tashkent. During these expeditions, male and female garments were also collected in large quantities. This remarkably colorful clothing, made from Bukhara silk of a soft, rosy color, is embroidered with wonderful gold ornaments, including not only patterns but inscriptions in Arabic as well. This dress was a part of a wedding garment made up of several items, and undershirt of superfine cotton textile. Female headwear, a Peshonabad frontlet embroidered with golden lanes, and a paranja. All of these outfits date to the late 19th, early 20th century. In the field inventory list, the owner of these garments was mentioned. This festive wedding dress was made for the future spouse of the tax collector of the cattle market in Bukhara. He was apparently quite a wealthy man, so he ordered this incredibly beautiful outfit for his young wife. The collection displays various robes and accessories of Uzbek clothing made from both exquisite and dense silk fabrics. Traditional Uzbek textiles have a long history and feature a uniquely recognizable pattern. But the value of this collection also lies in the fact that it was customized. Museum documents describe in detail the time and place of purchase. Indeed, it is extremely important who these garments belonged to. This male robe of Bukhara silk belonged to famous Russian lawyer Kony. It is clear that he also conducted business connected with Eastern territories, and as a result he was presented this wonderful robe of fine Bukhara silk. This robe was received by the museum from his descendants in the late 19th century, when Kony himself, unfortunately, was no longer alive. Since ancient times, luxurious robes have been presented in the East as a sign of respect. This tradition has survived to our days as well. This luxurious brocade robe of the 19th century fabric belonged to famous Uzbek poet and writer Aybek. It was given to him on his 60th birthday in 1965. The State Historical Museum received the robe together with literary materials on the classic Uzbek art. The museum collection also has a unique munisak, or an outer female slim fit robe. It is made of silk fabric of the highest quality, gleaming with blue and red colors. The tangled stylized pomegranate and almonds make for some exquisite ornamentation. These are ancient Oriental symbols. Almonds were considered a protective charm that kept evil spirits away, while pomegranates were a symbol of fertility. The lining is made of a fine Russian printed cotton manufactured by the Barana factory, which exported goods to the Central Asian market inclusively, as the local population liked them and purchased them in great quantities. This munisak was made in 1880 in Bukhara and preserved carefully as a relic when inherited by the following generations until it was eventually acquired by the museum. One more robe, dating to the late 19th century, was made of Bukhara silk fabric and quilted finely with exquisite skill by hand. It was acquired by museum personnel in the middle of the 20th century from Khwarezmiya Oblast. A quilted robe in the market was checked for quality by being placed straight up on the floor. If it managed to stay standing up on its own, it was a testament to the density and skill of the quilt. The funds of the museum also hold a concert costume from one of the first Uzbek actresses, megastar Tamara Hanum. This dress is made of satin and a short, sleeveless jacket nimcha of striped bekasam. It is well known that Tamara Artemovna performed on stage wearing this traditional costume in the 1930s. Here we are in the department of precise stones of the State Historical Museum, where there is a collection of around 30,000 items of gold and silver. My attention was attracted first of all by this golden binding of the sacred Quran. It is encrusted with silver and precise stones, emeralds and rubies. And in the middle of its exquisite composition we can see an inscription in Kufic handwriting, Holy Bukhara, and a wonderful glow. Here we can also note the date of when this masterpiece was created, 1907. This unique binding was presented to the museum by famous Russian collector and patron of the arts, Pyotr Ivanovich Shukin. Here we have a wrought silver dish from the 19th century, artistically decorated with carvings and gold plating, presented to the General Governor of Turkestan Krai, Mikhail Chernyaev. This is started in the inscription in Arabic script from the citizens of Chimbay city of the Khanate of Khiva. The dish found its way to the museum's collection in 1938. Jewelry art from Uzbekistan is represented here by only a few pieces, but they are at the same time vivid and first-class works. A special place among Uzbek jewelry is held by tumar amulets. Tumars were worn either on a chain or as a pendant hung on laced necklaces, like in this Khwarezmian piece from the 19th century. Tumars often conceal the message written on paper with a prayer or magic spell. This gorgeous necklace was purchased by the personnel of the museum in Khiva in 1951. According to the museum's description, it was created in the 19th century by the jeweler Yakubov for the wedding of his son. He also made paired jewelry for his fiancée, Butanternak headwear. It is curious to note that between pendants there are two escalopes made of horn. They prove that this protective ornament was empowered with magical qualities. The Takiatu-Z ornament for skull caps was a traditional silver Khwarezmian amulet. It is gold-plated from the front and decorated with red glass, turquoise and corals. In the center there is a round, flat carnelian with a carved inscription in Arabic. Since ancient times, carnelian has been considered a stone bringing both happiness and abundance. That is why Oriental women treated it with honor. This precise box, skillfully designed by Bukhara jewelers in the 19th century, is also a talisman. In the museum documents, this box is listed as nosqta, as it was at first used as a snuff box. The ancient land of Uzbekistan is justly referred to as a blooming garden of crafts. Everything we have told you today involuntarily brings us back to the origins of the people's culture and its genetic memory, which has forever kept its yearning for beauty. This has been a presentation of the Treasures of Uzbekistan Culture in Museums of the World project. This has been your host, Shaknaza Ganiyeva. Thank you all for your attention.